Welcome, everybody. I hope you can hear me. My name is Christopher Scott. I'm a professor at the University of Arizona in the School of Geography and Development, and also a research professor of public policy at the Udall Center for Studies in Public Policy. It is my great pleasure, on behalf of the University of Arizona College of Social and Behavioral Sciences, and several other sponsoring departments, to welcome you to this talk by Manuel Perló Cohen. Manuel and colleagues of the the UNAM Tucson Centro de Estudios Mexicanos Center for Mexican Studies office here have been putting together this program over the last couple of weeks at least. And so it's my great pleasure to obviously welcome you all here, give a brief introduction to the talk by Dr. Perló, but also mention very briefly that this is a continuing set of collaborative ventures of a sort, based on talks, based on collaborative research, and future programming that we'd like to explore in collaboration between UNAM and the University of Arizona. So without further ado, let me present both the title of the talk. I'll let Dr. Perló give further details on the hydrosocial sustainability of Mexico City. What a challenge, what a set of opportunities to learn both about the situation, the context, but also how UNAM is directly supporting these initiatives. And very briefly, to introduce our speaker, Dr. Manuel Perló Cohen is the director of the Institute of Social Research at UNAM, a position he's held for many years. He has his doctoral degree in urban and regional planning from the University of California, Berkeley. He obtained bachelor's degrees and master's at UNAM in social sciences. He's a member of the National System of Researchers. Dr. Perló's research includes Mexico City's urbanization history, Mexico political institutions, history and disasters prevention. And as part of his academic initiative, he has published numerous books, scientific articles, and has run a whole series of academic and applied research ventures in Mexico and internationally. He's had a number of collaborations, obviously with the United States, having gotten his doctorate in California, but also has a wide-ranging set of collaborative activities, including in places like Colombia. Internationally, he's been named to an Order of Orange Nassau for various collaborative activities in the Netherlands. His CV is impressive, and it goes on and on. So I won't go into further details other than to welcome you all here, and of course, welcome Dr. Perló. Before I pass the microphone, our tech support did say that when it goes to questions and answers, all of those little hanging devices from the ceiling are microphones, so you don't need to have a microphone to ask a question. You just need to speak up, and apparently this room is entirely mic'd. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's really a great pleasure to be here. I'm very excited about having been invited to the University of Arizona to strengthen our relations with a number of scholars, but also to deliver this presentation. I want to thank, first of all, the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences, the School of Geography and Development, the Center for Latin American Studies, and of course, Dr. Christopher Scott has been extremely generous and helpful in bringing me here and helping me to prepare this presentation. And I'm also very grateful to Dr. Claudio Estrada, the representative of the National Autonomous University of Mexico here at the University of Arizona, who has done a terrific job in bridging relations between the two institutions, and who will do even more build a stronger relation between the two institutions. So thank you very much, Claudio, for bringing me here. And thanks to all of you for being here on Friday. Friday is a day for other activities, but being at this conference shows that you are devoted to your work and you are willing to spend some time to hear what's going on in Mexico City in relation with hydro-social sustainability. So I'm going to start with my presentation. I'm going to tell you a story of problems, of confrontations, of conflicts, but also a story of hope, I hope. Basically, I'm going to present you a project that the National Autonomous University is carrying out at this moment in order to do something in favor of sustainability. That's the main message I want to express. I'm going to be covering in this presentation the following topics. What do I have? Half an hour or 45 minutes? 45 minutes, great. So those are the main topics that I will be covering. And let's start with an everyday life scene in Mexico City. You have water shortages, you have leaks, you have floods, you have soil subsiding, you have cracks and contamination. That's just in one day. You can find those different phenomena taking place in Mexico City. Floods and shortage of water, isn't that a contradiction? Well, it's a contradiction that takes place in Mexico City. Leaks and water shortage, yes. All that happens in Mexico City regardless of the time of the year. It can be in the winter, you can have floods in the winter, you can have water shortage during the rain season, and believe me, we get a lot of water during the rain season. 5 or 6 times as much as the one you get here. And in some points, 15 to 20 times more. Because we are an enormous basin where you have different hydrological regimes. So it rains differently. I'll give you some more information further. Well, but these are only the symptoms. There are more worrisome problems in relation with hydraulic problems. We have, for example, aquifer overexploitation or depletion, as you call it here. And you can see how the official figures are telling us that we are overexploiting the aquifers that provide Mexico City, a city of 22 million, with problems of overexploitation. Actually, the real overexploitation rate is higher. A terrible problem we have in Mexico is soil subsiding. You can see the original measures in some points, or the same point a few years later, and you can see how the city is sinking, literally sinking. Some places are 30 feet below its original level. downtown, for example. So flooding, it's not only a problem, it can be a catastrophe. If one of our sewage system stops for whatever reason, we might be covered with water, a mix of rain and a mix of sewer in a couple of hours. That has happened in Mexico City. We're not talking about a possibility. It's a non-self-supporting financial system. You can see here, and these are again official figures, but the real numbers are even higher. We have to subsidize our hydraulic system. We have to invest a lot of money to keep this system working. And one problem that we have is that at any moment we might have a mega disaster as we have had in the last 100 years. And even if we go back to Mexico City's history, the history of this city has been plagued with catastrophes, hydraulic catastrophes. The city, even during the times of the Aztec Empire, the city was flooded on 3 occasions. And at what point during the colonial era, the city had to be changed by royal order to a different place. However, there was a revolt against that measure and the city was left in its original place. In order for this system to work, you need social, political, and institutional arrangements. But very often, people revolt against these arrangements. And you have here the Masawa, a group of Masawa women who went into Congress to protest against the transfer of water from their communities to serve Mexico City. So you have these kind of problems every day. You can read everyday press in Mexico and see problems related with water. Of course, this has led to a lack of sustainability a long time ago. We have lost sustainability long time ago. The problem, the challenge is that we're going down even more and we might face even problems even greater than the ones we saw. Now, to have a picture of the dimension of the hydraulic system in Mexico, you have to keep in mind that this is Mexico City here. But Mexico City is served by other basins. Sorry that I didn't write the names in English, but Cuenca is the basin of Cutzamala. This provides water to the city. There is a large infrastructure built over the centuries to serve Mexico City. Here you have some numbers. And it's clear that just to bring water to the city involves large aqueducts. For example, the Masawas live here, and they are against this basin to provide water to Mexico City. But once we use the water, we have to pump it out because the city cannot keep. It doesn't have the lakes it used to have. It doesn't have the rivers that it used to have to keep that water inside. So the solution given 4 centuries ago was to expel the water outside of this basin. Some people believe that this was a huge mistake, but we are still working on the same path. We are not going to go into the theoretical debate about what kind of system is the one we have in Mexico City, but I would like to say that I share the opinion of these authors who call our system a stable pathological system. That is a system that works, that fulfills certain functions, very important. I mean, to serve a population of 22 million, it's not that easy. And in a way, and with all its deficiencies, it keeps that function. However, it is done in a pathological way. And when a system is riddled with a pathological problem, it might die. And that's the danger we are facing in the future. The trends of the system, and I'm just going to talk about one. Government sources say that in the year 2030, if we don't do any major changes, only 8%, sorry about this, only 8% of the service will be considered good service. The rest will be bad service, or won't be any service at all. So we could be taking all the points and say what will happen in terms of water quality, in terms of social conflicts, in terms of financial sustainability, and all the indicators show us that in the year 2030, if we don't do major changes, we will face a major hydraulic problem in Mexico City. Okay, everybody in Mexico City recognizes that we have a huge problem.
Manuel, would you just explain what half of it is on the left side? Both of those add up to more than 50, called tandeo. Can you just give a good English?
Yes, tandeo is water rationing. When you have really to tell people you are going to get water once a week for 2 hours. So tandeo will be the basic trait of the system. In some cases, people even don't get once a week for 1 hour. Simply, they have the infrastructure and they don't get any water, or they get very low quality water. Now, how to solve the problem? This concern has occupied engineers, politicians, scholars for many centuries. There is some of you who have dealt with Mexico City's hydraulic history know very well that this debate goes back to the Aztecs. They have also different views on how to solve the problems. And if you do a review of different moments, you'll find different solutions. For example, we had an engineer from the Netherlands who came in the 17th century, at the early 17th century, and said, why don't you keep the system the Aztecs had of a city built in the middle of the lake? You should keep that system. But the colonial regime changed that and said, no, we have to make this city into a dry space of land, and we will build huge drainage systems to avoid floods. So we've always had conflicting views on how to address the problems. We're going to present two different views on how to solve these problems. One approach, which we can call the structural approach, and the one that is dominant, that is the prevalent one, says we need to bring more water from other basins. And there are already plans to do that. Engineers say, well, we need the political decision, the political determination, and we already have the money. We have ways to finance all this. So we should bring water from all these places. Some of them are 150 miles away from Mexico City. In this same approach, how do we deal with floods? Well, here's the President Peña Nieto with the mayor of Mexico City and the governor of the state of Mexico, and they are visiting a major infrastructure project that is being built right now called Túnel Emisor Oriente. This project is worth $3 billion, and it started in 5 years ago, and it's only 40% done. And it will help to avoid floods in northeastern Mexico City. We already have 4 of those. It's not new. We already have 4. And the idea is, well, if we have 4, why not a 5th? You know? Because that's the way the hydraulic paradigm works. You know, if this has worked in the past, why don't you continue to do the same thing? It's very difficult to change the pattern of behavior in hydraulic systems. You can even change the political system, as we did in Mexico 15 years ago, when for the first time we had real democratic elections. But to change an hydraulic system, it's extremely more difficult. We are building right now the largest wastewater treatment plants in all Latin America. Here you have the guy behind, Carlos Slim, the richest man in Mexico and one of the 5 or 6 richest in all the world. So he found a way to make a good business out of this investment. So the combination of politicians, here's Presidente Calderón, of businessmen, of politicians, this was Rafael Elvira Quesada, the former Secretary of Environment. If they bring together, and you have the engineers behind you, you can move into larger, more expensive water projects. No problem. Okay, let's talk about non-structural and soft policies. To speak about soft policies would convey the idea that we will treat them nicely and without problems. Actually, these soft policies are even more difficult to implement, to apply, than the traditional ones, than the structural solutions, because they deal with a multidisciplinary approach. They bring environmental sciences, engineering, social sciences, history, anthropology, and other views on how to deal with hydraulic problems. So they are not really soft policies. They are hard policies. They are very hard to implement policies. We have some very interesting examples in Mexico City of large projects carried out with this approach. The pioneer was the Lake Texcoco project. which started in the 60s. And the idea was to turn part of the old bed lake of Texcoco into a lake. Isn't that incredible? We have an incredible system of lakes in Mexico City, in the basin of Mexico, and now we have to rebuild those lakes. This project hasn't get any resources lately, so it's almost abandoned, which is really a pity. We have, for example, in the last years, and Juan Pablo knows very well, Juan Pablo Estrada knows very well because he worked in that project that was carried out by the university, rescuing urban rivers. That's something new in Mexico. It's something that has been done in the US, in Europe, in Korea, in China, everywhere. In Mexico, it's quite new. And it hasn't worked that well, to tell you the truth. We were involved in this project, and one government decided to support the rescue of the river Magdalena, but the next one decided they didn't want to do anymore. Another beautiful example is the Xochimilco Ecological Park, carried out during the government of Manuel Camacho Solis. And it was a very difficult, socially speaking and politically speaking, project to carry out, but it was done, and it's now there. Of course, I won't talk here, but I want to show you that there are a number of experiences worldwide in relation with hydroparks, with recovering urban rivers, lakes, and so forth. And I'm going to talk about one project the university is currently doing in this approach, along the second approach we're talking about. And it's inspired in the water-sensitive urban design approach, which I'm not going to talk much about it, but basically it says that you can bring the hydrological cycle into the city and build the city in accordance to that cycle. And now I'm going to talk about the most important point of the presentation, a new project that the National Autonomous University of Mexico is doing in order to revert all the problems we mentioned. And it is called the Quebradora Hydro Park. I will explain in a moment why Quebradora and why Hydro Park. This is a, Stacy, you are gonna like this painting because it's a recreation of how Tenochtitlan, not only Tenochtitlan, but all the cultures that lived around the lakes in the 14th or 15th century used to live. You have here Mexico Tenochtitlan, Mexico City. This is where downtown Mexico is located. But you have a number of cities, some of them 50,000, 60,000 inhabitants, who lived around the lake. And you had a unique system of lakes. This was a salty lake, and this was a freshwater lake of incredible wealth. And Iztapalapa used to be here, in the crossroads of the two lakes in Mexico. And the only crazy guys to build a city in the middle of the lakes were the Mexicas or the Aztecs. The other ones knew very well that they shouldn't establish themselves in the middle of the lake. It was really a very crazy idea, but history tells us that the Mexicas or Aztecs were the last tribe of all these people to arrive into the valley, and they were like the outcasts of the family. So they had to run from one place to another. And in order to survive, they established themselves in the middle of the lake, in the middle of a swamp, actually. And they were able enough to conquer all the people because they were warriors. So they were able to establish a system to have military domination of all the people. So when the Spaniards came in 1521, these were the rulers of a vast empire. And they ruled that like in Venice, from the middle of the lake. But they had to face a lot of problems, and in order to fight floods, water shortage, and other problems, they built a huge infrastructure. So that's where all started. This is the borough of Iztapalapa, almost 2 million people. This was Iztapalapa in 1940. This is Iztapalapa in 2010. From 29,000 inhabitants to almost, if we consider the last 5 years, almost 2 million. What problems do people have in Iztapalapa? All the agricultural problems you can imagine. What we saw in the first flight, we can see it now. We have bad water quality, we have floods, we have water shortage, and we have holes swallowing cars, kids, dogs, and everything. Well, let's move into the project that we are working on. Quebradora, it's flood vessel control. Vasoregulador. Flood vessel control that was built by the government in the 70s in order to avoid problems in this area. One of the worst areas in terms of employment, of violence, of poverty in Mexico City. When you hear the name Iztapalapa, you relate that with the worst things in Mexico City, with crime, with unemployment, with poverty. Just Google Iztapalapa, problems in Iztapalapa, and you'll see the most horrid images you can imagine. So this place was developed as a flood control vessel, but the government decided a few years ago to build an underground sewage to avoid more problems here, and it left that site abandoned. Or they left the site waiting for the 50-year big storm that could hit this area. So they said, we have to leave the place untouched, without any construction, and we'll keep it as a flood control vessel. But the place is losing its initial territory, because if you leave an empty place in Mexico City with the hope that it will stay empty, you are dreaming. The place will be invaded, the place will be bought into the real estate, or something will happen, and if we leave this place alone, in a few years it will disappear. It will be either a new shopping mall, or it will be not in the American sense, shopping mall for a popular area like Iztapalapa, and it will disappear if we leave it just like that. So you can see here the site and all the problems associated with the site. We have problems of insecurity, we have lack of lighting, we have areas of traffic, we have cities flooded. All the problems you can think about surround the site. Well, let me stop for a moment and say that many years ago, like not that many, 5-6 years ago, a group of people from the National Autonomous University spotted this place. And it was a group of architects, landscape architects, engineers, sociologists, urban planners, and we ask ourselves, why is this place abandoned? Why don't we do something to rescue this place and build something or do something with this place? And we approached the local authorities, and they were initially interested in doing some project in that place. But we found that the head of the borough government, which is called delegado, who is elected for that job, only lasts 3 years in the job, and they were not interested in developing a medium and long-term project. So they asked us, when can we open this park? Well, perhaps in 3, 4, 5 years. In 2 years, I won't be in this office. So I need something to cut the ribbon and appear on the news saying that this has been done by me, so I'm not interested in this kind of project. So there is a very interesting conflict between the political system and how it works and the long-term duration of and maturation of projects. But we were able to find a very interesting politician who is currently the head of the borough of Iztapalapa. She's a woman, Dione Anguiano, and we convinced her, these two people here, me and an architect, a young architect from the National Autonomous University, to do a park in that site. And we told her, when we took her to the place, she immediately asked us, when can I begin building in this place? And we told her, well, we have to do research for 1 year to see the conditions of the soil, to see how much water the place gets. And after doing a very, very deep research on the nature of the site, then we can tell you what can be done, not before. And she said, well, when can I start building? Well, perhaps in 1 year, but not before we finish the study. And how much will it cost just to do the executive project? We told her it will cost $1 million. You have to have in mind that Iztapalapa has a budget of $100 million. So to give $1 million to an executive project, it's a very, very daring thing. You don't find that in the political system very often. But she was willing to do that. We did, and this is a very important part, different workshops with the people who lived around, to see how they view this place and what were they willing to do and to accept for this site. And we worked with communities for about 6 months just to draw a map of the things they wanted to do in this park. Some of them had crazy ideas, like building an Olympic pool, swimming pool in the place, or a shopping mall, or more housing, or a school. And we told them that can be done in this place. This place has to keep its basic hydraulic functions, but we have to combine them with other things. So be welcome to present other solutions, other choices, other proposals to the place. And we started to do the technical work. I have to say that it's not easy in Mexico to find a multidisciplinary group to do a project like this one, to build an hydro park. You don't find. You have to hire a company from the US or from Europe, from the Netherlands. I'm familiar with some of them. But you don't find a group of engineers, geologists, sociologists, lawyers, anthropologists, lawyers who are willing to work in this kind of project. But we have to bring them. And luckily enough, at UNAM, you find all these kind of people. So this is basically a project for the National University of Mexico, with people who work there full time. And we ended up with all these options that could be put in the site without compromising the hydraulic functions of the place. The place has to maintain at least 3 hydraulic traits. One, it has to help floods in the area. So it has to receive a lot of water, mainly rainwater. But also, and this is the interesting part, it can also receive water from the sewer, from the source. And that's the new approach we are developing in the place. It has to infiltrate water in the aquifers, a function that it's performing right now. But it's doing it without any control. It's raw infiltration to the aquifers. And it has to help the sewer system not to be exposed to a heavy rainstorm. So it has to keep these 3 functions. And if we want really to be able to have the project going on, we have to comply with these 3 conditions. But besides that, we can do all these things in the park. We can have sociocultural activities, we can have landscape, we can have rainwater harvesting, we can have reuse of water, and a number of activities that we are currently doing. But the site has a potential really to have an impact on the surrounding zone. And that's another important thing. So currently we are delivering, the executive project, and we are thinking of keeping those hydraulic functions, but at the same time giving the people of the area, which at this moment lack any open space or any green areas, we're giving them open air theater. We are projecting to build a cyclopist around the park, and a number of activities this is the way the park should look when finished. As you can see, the place is located at the close to the Sierra de Santa Catarina. All the water from this area comes to the park, and it will infiltrate water in these two pools. So, where do we stand now in relation with this project? Well, we're about to finish the executive project for the park, and we are starting to build the public relations part of the park. If we don't make this project into a project where all the city is interested, and we have the help of the central government of Mexico City, this project won't happen. So we are in a very interesting point of seeing if this project will move or not. Now you can tell me, well, you can build your hydro park. How will it help Mexico City? This park is just a drop in the bucket. It won't change things. Well, let me tell you that Mexico City has an incredible infrastructure that can be converted into projects such as the hydro park Quebradora. For example, we have 19 dams with storage capacity in the western part of the city. We have 9 regulatory lagoons. These places are nowadays in complete abandonment. They are places full with garbage. There is no investment in these places, so they don't perform any interesting function. If we rescue these places, 3 minutes, okay. If we rescue these places, we can make a difference. We have also these regulatory vessels, some of them 10 or 20 times larger than Quebradora, that could also perform very important functions. So we can make a difference working on that. And just to give you a number, the structural projects currently underway cost around $7 billion. You would have to invest $100 million to clean and to develop projects in all these sites. So if you could divert part of the money that you spend in water transfers or in large sewage systems or in wastewater treatment plants, we could make a difference. And let me finish with a few considerations. First, this is a beautiful picture from the Códice Durán, drawn in the 16th century, and it depicts a war between the Mexicas and the people from Coyoacán on water. There were world waters in that time, and we still have world waters nowadays. So either we choose this path or we choose Mexico Tenochtitlan. It was not an ideal world, no, but it's the moment when Mexico City had its harmony with the surrounding environment. So we are not going to go back, and I'm already finishing with my presentation. We're not going to go back to the old Tenochtitlan image. We cannot do that. This whole area is covered by the city. nowadays. This is only for those of you who have been in Mexico City, the historic district, the Centro Histórico. But all this is the city. So we won't be able really to change that. But we can turn all these small places, all the rivers, all the lakes that haven't been covered by the city to a different place, and we can make a difference in terms of solving our problems. Now, this will take decades and perhaps centuries. But if we don't start now to move on that direction, the future of Mexico City is at stake. So that's why I think we have to move on a different approach and try to build not one or two, but hundreds of projects with the support of local communities in order to be able to turn the tide and make a difference in Mexico City. Thank you.
We do have some time for questions, and Dr. Perló will give a discussion, but also keep in mind as you're going out or before you go out, there is lunch, but we'll start that in about 10 or 15 minutes. Please.
How were you able to get so many people from the university to work together?
Should I take a couple of questions more and then give the answer? Please, Bill.
Yes, my question is how to draw more people in. Mexico's population now is rated the most obese in the world. I think water is one solution to soft drinks, Coca-Cola, things like that. So are the public health officials involved in your projects as well?
Okay, let me take these two questions. Well, first of all, not only the National Autonomous University of Mexico, but other universities and academic centers have tried to give solutions to the hydraulic problems of Mexico City. So there is a large number of studies, of research, trying to bring new solutions. But it's not easy. And sometimes these solutions tell you, well, we have to change the system. But they don't provide like specific actions to take. They just say, well, we have to keep the water in the basin. And we can do that with large projects. But what projects? And sometimes the solutions are not applied solutions. So a number of people at my university have tried to bring local solutions and build them together with the communities. So we brought people from the School of Architecture, from the Institute of Engineering, we brought people from the School of Political Science, we brought people from all over who have been working in water issues. And we told them, we have an opportunity to bring the borough of Iztapalapa with a different project. We're not going to profit out of this. We're not selling consultant services, but we're going to be paid to do this work. So why don't you get involved? Why don't you do your dissertation or your social work in this project? And in Mexico City, when you say that you are a member of the National Autonomous University of Mexico, you have confidence from people. They open the doors. They say, well, if you come from the university, that means that you are really working with good faith. And we will let you come to our community to explain your views. Let me tell you that very often, communities are reluctant and they reject any project that the government might bring, even if it's a good project, because there is a huge distrust from the government institutions. So we were able to put this group. We are working, it's a group of 35 people, and now this group has been invited to other projects. So the hope we have, and that's why I said from the outset, this is a story of hope, that this can be replicated in other parts of the city. And that we and other groups similar to this can do and make interesting proposals to change the hydraulic situation of particular sites in the Valley of Mexico. And, well, if we are going to have an hydraulic park, this park has to have also sports facilities, has to have recreational activities and cultural activities. So we're thinking on doing a project that brings together different activities and approaches, not only hydraulic, because if you bring only an hydraulic approach, people won't feel that this is really solving and offering a wider perspective. There are several. We will start here and move to the back. Yes, Stacy.
In the plan that you showed, you had two big rectangular basins of water which were nicely landscaped. And that provides a very interesting sort of focal point. And I'm curious to know how many people, or what is the sort of response to people in the community for that visual presence of water, which hasn't been there. And I'm also thinking, along the lines of some of the projects by Taller Frese and uncovering, the Rio de la Piedad and all of that, so that the view of water is there, which was not, and obviously in a controlled way.
I think that to think about or approach Mexico City's many water problems, I think you have to start with the premise that it's politically untenable. And I think, so you kind of talked a little bit about the politics and different views of the water structure. And I was wondering if you could reflect a little bit more on that idea. Not to say that, to be apathetic or throw our hands up and say there's nothing to be done. But if you start with that idea, that it's politically untenable given the set of assumptions about development that Mexico City currently has, which you can say that about Tucson also, then how does that affect the kinds of approaches that you could take to solving the problem?
Okay. We'll take a third question and then we'll move. If we still have time, Chris, yes?
Yeah, let's keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, so one was a comment that I wondered if you were familiar with the Tijuana River Park, where they recently Conagua finally approved a community-based effort to put in basically kind of a wetland soft path approach to maintaining and rebuilding the natural ecosystem.
Where?
Right in the Tijuana River Park.
Ah, yes. Uh-huh.
And Conagua first concrete lined half of it, and then at the 11th hour they finally agreed to go with the community's plan. It might be a really interesting parallel because it's right in urban community with puras colonias and all the barrancas and so on. But my question is, so I work on I've written a lot about Mexico water governance, and I think there's a kind of cognitive dissonance with all the written reports that really champion environmental sustainability. I mean, sustainability is written all through all of the documents, water planning documents, and so on. But in practice, then, as you've said, the government, Conagua, seems to follow this very hard path, structural kinds of approaches. So I'm wondering if you can reflect on that at all. How do you explain this kind of internal conflict? And Mexico also presents this very environmental face to the world, and yet so many of its issues are often solved with, interbasin transfers and new dams and so on.
Okay. Well, let me answer these three interesting questions. Stacy, people are afraid of water because they've been affected by water in many ways. All the people in the borough of Iztapalapa have suffered directly floods or the lack of water or bad quality. They cannot drink tap water. It's forbidden. So they have to spend 15 to 20% of their income just to have water. So whenever you tell them, listen, we're going to infiltrate water in the aquifer, they see it as a possible threat. Well, and they ask, will this affect my home? Will I have that water? I live 500 meters away from the site where you are projecting the park. Will this affect my home? Will I have water coming out of the sewage? Are you going to take away my water to water the park? So all the questions are related with the perils of the project. And of course, they are happy to hear that they are going to have green space, open space, and all that. But we had, for example, to bring a public notary to one of the buildings to see how the structural conditions were and to sign that the park was not going to harm the structural conditions of the building. So you have a very, very distrustful feeling from the, sorry about this. I thought I had turned off my, sorry about this. Well, I was telling that you have to work really very hard with neighbors and explain them thoroughly the possible consequences and even to sign that there are not going to be any consequences, any harm, possible harm done to their properties and to their lives. And they have a very defensive approach. That's why we had to work for months and months explaining them, showing them other experiences worldwide, and telling them that, yes, there are risks, of course, but that the benefits they are going to receive from this park are even more important. How can we convince political actors to have a different approach on the kind of projects they want to build? If I understood well your question, well, as you know, I've worked with urban history and urban hydrological history, and we often ask ourselves, how can hydraulic systems be changed? And we focus on stakeholders, on political actors, because we know that an hydraulic system works with a technological part, but also with a social and a political component. And we have found that hydraulic systems change under three situations. One of them is when you have a catastrophe, when something really bad happens and then there is a change in the paradigm. Secondly, when there is a technological change that helps the system work. And third, when you have political will, when you have a politician, a leader that says, let's go for a new thing, let's go for a new project. Well, that hasn't happened in Mexico City for a long time, but it happened in the past. As you know, the central sewer system the Canal del Desagüe in Mexico City was built by President Porfirio Diaz. And he was behind all that effort for 30 years. So it took a real important leader and political will and a number of conditions to do the change. Now, we don't have this type of political leaders anymore. Locally, we don't have presidents who stay for 30 years. But unfortunately, the head of the borough stays only for 3 years. So we have to convince these local politicians that building for the future is the best thing. Now, how do we do it? Well, it's not easy. And we have taken these projects to different politicians, and the answer in almost all cases is, sorry, but I'm going to be here for a couple of years, and I'm not interested in investing in some long-term or medium-term projects. But what we have found is that if you convince these politicians that they can do a change in history through these projects, then you are touching a very special spot, and you might lure them into a project such as what we're developing. We have to have the ability to convince politicians that these projects are really worth for their political career. So we, at the academic world, we have to find ways really to convince politicians. Actually, this part started when the leader of the borough won the elections, and we approached her and we told her, listen, do you want to run for mayor in 2018? This will be an iconic project. This will bring you to the fore. This will allow you to establish relations with many different groups within the city. So take political advantage of this. And she has been willing to go for that bid. So we have to learn how to convince politicians that they should invest in environmental sustainability and not in short-term result projects. I don't know if that answers your question, but why do we still have this kind of projects? Well, I showed you in one of the images Carlos Slim investing in one of the big projects. Sure, there is big money, big business behind this. But we also have a group of hydraulic technocrats who believe in this and who are opposed and who don't believe that the other approach can bring really long-term solutions. And there is also a key element, uncertainty. And that's something politicians don't like to deal with, especially when they have to invest in major infrastructure projects. They don't want to have uncertainty. If you tell them that you are going to bring water from another basin and you tell them you are going to invest this amount of money and it will take 2 to 5 years, and in 5 years you will have 5 cubic meters more than the ones you have, and you are going to be able to provide the needs of the population with that water. They believe in that. And hydraulic technocrats feed that view of things. And they don't like to change. For example, when you ask the head of the water system in Mexico City, why don't you support this kind of projects? He says, well, listen, how much water can we bring into the system? Well, we'll bring perhaps 10%, 50% more from recycled water. That's not enough. I need large quantities of water. So I'm not willing to invest in projects that I don't know what the result will be. So I think we're dealing with a very fixed group of technocrats, of business, and of politicians who are not willing to move into a different scheme. You do find some of them lured by the idea of sustainability. Yes, they say, well, we want to move into that because everybody talks about that and we should be into the new fashion. But it's not easy to convince them to change the kind of project. And in relation with the Tijuana River, the Tijuana River was done in the 70s by Presidente Echeverría in the old-fashioned way. You know, let's pave the whole river, and that way we will save the city. And it was done in many other cities around Mexico, in Monterrey, in Tijuana, actually in Hermosillo it's been done. But we know that these are not the best solutions in terms of managing the water, managing rivers, and really using the riverbed for other uses. So we have very few projects like the one that is now underway in Tijuana, unfortunately. But those could be also good examples nationwide to show that there are other ways to solve hydraulic problems.
Let's give final round. I know there are one or two more questions, but I'm going to ask you to please approach Dr. Perló afterwards because we really are out of time. So let's give a nice round of applause. I'll have just one or two brief announcements and some acknowledgments. So I mentioned earlier the Centro de Estudios Mexicanos of UNAM in Tucson, and let me formally present Dr. Claudio Estrada, who is the director of that center and is located here at the University of Arizona campus. Also with us here is Armando Bautista, who is the deputy director of the same institute. And to the left over there is Mitzi Gonzalez, who is a very integral part of their team. So thank you all.